This morning, I would like to begin with the prophetic words of Unitarian Universalist, minister, and poet, Dr. Rebecca Parker. In the midst of a world marked by tragedy and beauty, there must be those who bear witness against unnecessary destruction and who with faith stand and lead in freedom with grace and power. There must be those who speak honestly and do not avoid seeing what must be seen of sorrow and outrage or tenderness and wonder. There must be those whose grief troubles the water while their voices sing and speak of refreshed worlds. There must be those whose exuberance rises with lovely energy that articulates earth's joys. There must be those who are restless for respectful and loving companionship among human beings, whose presence invites people to be themselves without fear. There must be those who gather with the congregation of remembrance and compassion, draw water from old wells, and walk the simple path of love for neighbor. And there must be communities of people who seek to do justice, love kindness, and walk humbly with God, who call on the strength of soul force to heal, transform, and bless life. There must be religious witness. Malcolm Calvert was a special education student in the 7th grade when he got into an argument on the school bus and threw a Tootsie Pop at his friend. This action resulted in Malcolm being led off the bus in handcuffs, arrested by the Broward County Police, and locked up in a juvenile detention facility for several hours before the authorities finally allowed his father to take him home. Malcolm was charged with misdemeanor battery. The state attorney's office eventually dropped the charge, but only after Malcolm's friend formally testified in court that his family did not wish to press charges over the candy flung across a bus. 2 years later, Malcolm continues to deal with the trauma of his arrest. He is a different child than the one who boarded the bus with a Tootsie Pop in his pocket one morning. After his arrest, Malcolm started acting out in class and has since had additional run-ins with the police for other petty offenses. He is still seeing a counselor for depression. While Malcolm avoided a trial, the arrest will follow him as he applies for jobs for the rest of his life. A background check on Malcolm will forever reveal an arrest for battery, with no mention of the circumstances of the thrown lollipop. While Malcolm's story may sound astonishing, it is not uncommon. Over 50,000 young people were arrested in Florida last year. Some of these arrests were for dangerous and violent behavior and were absolutely warranted. It is not these serious offenses we are speaking to today, but the surge of cases like Malcolm's, where a dumb adolescent mistake saddles a child with a criminal record for life. These cases are the devastating consequence of Florida's zero-tolerance legislation, which mandates swift and harsh punishment for bad behavior in Florida schools. Overwhelmed teachers, counselors, and administrators are increasingly relying on police officers to enforce discipline in schools. The state of Florida now leads the nation in the number of children who are arrested at school. In addition, Human Rights Watch has identified Florida as the state with the worst record of transferring children into the adult court system. Are you feeling discouraged? Because it gets worse. The young people who are being rapidly funneled into this school-to-prison pipeline are disproportionately children of color and students with disabilities. Being hauled off in handcuffs has a lifelong impact on a child. The experience is traumatic and can lead to a host of psychological issues. The label of delinquent is hard to shake in a school setting. Cases are often dropped for these type of petty misdemeanors, but the record of the arrest is permanent. Florida's public information laws make it almost impossible to keep juvenile records private or have them fully expunged. To be convicted of a crime is even more damaging. Convicted felons in Florida lose their right to vote and are forever barred from accessing a host of government benefits. As citizens in a democracy, we have the power to swing the pendulum back if we decide that we don't actually want to be a zero tolerance, tough on crime, 3 strikes you're out kind of society. But we have to decide to do it, and we have to act fast. This is a critical moment for juvenile justice in this country. It is becoming widely recognized that zero tolerance policies have failed to change behavior and have only served to convert children into criminals. A national movement is growing to close the school-to-prison pipeline, and many localities are implementing common sense policies that address the whole child and not just his or her behavior. At the same time, school shootings continue to shock and terrify the country. We are deeply afraid for our children, and our natural impulse is to ramp up security and increase the police presence in schools. The policy decisions that we make today in response to Newton and other recent tragedies will have consequences for decades to come. As Unitarian Universalists who affirm justice, equity, and compassion in human relations as a guiding principle, how will we step up to this defining moment of a generation? While a policy structure that shuttles children, mostly Black and brown children, out of schools and into prisons sounds scandalous, this story is not headline news. As a society, we are more able to focus our outrage on the racist behavior of one rich white owner of an NBA team than on a system of oppression. For over 100 years, this church has played a powerful role as the conscience of Jacksonville, Florida. We have advanced social justice in this city by pushing boundaries and by shining the light on systems of inequality. Our founder, Duncan Fletcher, was an activist who supported women's suffrage and helped James Weldon Johnson become the first African-American lawyer in Florida. In the 50s, we were forced to move frequently because no one wanted to rent space to a church with an integrated congregation taking on provocative topics each Sunday. In the 60s, members of this church were instrumental in advancing the local civil rights movement, and we were proud to send our minister to Selma to march in the name of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Jacksonville. Despite threats to his life, Reverend McGehee continued to participate in the local civil rights demonstrations, often marching in solidarity as the only white clergy member in the crowd. In the 80s, we opened our sanctuary to the Metropolitan Community Church when no other venue would rent to this congregation of LGBTQ worshipers. And we were one of the first churches to start a local AIDS ministry. These are just a few of the highlights of our proud history of social justice, shared to inspire us all to keep pushing for a community that reflects our values. As Dr. King reminds us in his letter from a Birmingham jail, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Juvenile justice is not just an issue for people with children or parents whose kids are still in the school system. The school to prison pipeline is a disgrace, and it is being carried out in all of our names by the people we have elected to represent us. Remember that I told you that Florida leads the country in trying children in the adult criminal justice system? Would anyone care to venture a guess as to which county within Florida has the highest rate of transferring youth to adult courts? Sadly, guess. That dubious distinction belongs to our own Duval County. While incredible damage has already been done to multiple generations of children, there is hope for creating the type of community that we want to be. This church is a leader in the I Care movement, which is a coalition of 38 congregations who are committed to working together to rectify issues of injustice in our city. I Care is challenging Duval County to close its school-to-prison pipeline and is educating the community about the power of restorative justice. The restorative justice approach is characterized by rehabilitation and empathy for rule breakers rather than harsh punishment. Restorative resolutions engaged those who are harmed, wrongdoers, and their affected communities to create solutions that promote repair and reconciliation. The data on restorative justice programs is astonishingly hopeful. New Zealand implemented a national restorative justice program in 1989, and today, juvenile incarceration is virtually obsolete in that country. I Care has pushed to implement systems of restorative justice here in Jacksonville. So far, 14 accountability boards have been established in local neighborhoods and schools. Young people who commit petty crimes can be diverted to these groups to be sanctioned and supported with effective approaches like counseling and mentorship and community service instead of entering the criminal justice system. Our own Lois Haft has been instrumental in this work to bring reproductive justice options to Jacksonville's children. Lois serves on I Care's Youth Crime Research Committee, which has done the extensive legwork that has made this progress possible. As part of her deep commitment to this work, Lois also works with troubled children as a member of a neighborhood accountability board. This month, UUCJ is proud to honor Lois as our Generosity in Action volunteer in recognition of her extraordinary work for our church and our community. Lois, will you please stand and let us recognize you? Well, I can tell that I'm not the only one who's inspired by the people in this congregation, like Lois, whose hard work sustains and advances UUCJ's social justice legacy. Today in Jacksonville, we are once again facing a social crisis that demands we put our faith into action. The Jacksonville City Council is currently considering legislation designed to expand the use of civil citations and restorative justice solutions. Our council members have yet to find the courage of their convictions to vote on this important measure. I suggest that we make it our mission to help them. Our Unitarian Universalist values compel us to speak out against a system that violates every part of our second principle. Justice, equity, and compassion demand that children be allowed to make mistakes, even really stupid mistakes, without having lifelong consequences. The notion of restorative justice resonates deeply with our Universalist heritage. Early Universalists stood opposed to the draconian ideas of fundamentalist Christianity that suggested that one sin could damn you to an eternity of consequences. Our forebears instead believed in love, second chances, and reconciliation. I commend all of us to dig deep into our UU heritage and summon the moral outrage necessary to throw our lot in with the side of justice, while we encourage our elected officials to do the same. Reach out to your city council representative and express your feelings on criminalizing the children of our community. If you don't feel that the state attorney who we elected is representing your values, let her know about it. If you don't see the changes that justice demand, get engaged to elect different people to represent your interests. Share your outrage. Talk to your friends and educate people about what is really happening with our failed juvenile justice system. Write a letter to the editor. Inspire others with the possibilities of embracing a restorative justice approach. Change the conversation in this city. In this inescapable network of mutuality, it's easy to agree that we all want thriving schools and safe children. It is more challenging to address the fact that our approach has failed to deliver either and has instead become an appalling, oppressive system that funnels the most vulnerable children out of schools and into prisons. How many more children like Malcolm will have the course of their life forever altered by making a mistake? How many more children like Malcolm will it take to fuel our moral outrage and inspire us to action? As an American, a Floridian, and a Duval County resident, I can no longer tolerate this injustice being done in my name. It is my hope and my prayer this morning that you all will join me in fighting for our children. Blessed be.